Welcome to a special episode of The Authority File. I'm your host, Bill Mickey. This and the next several episodes were all recorded straight off the exhibit hall floor at ACRL's annual conference, which just concluded a 4-day run in Cleveland, Ohio, April 10 through the 13th. Authority File producer Mark Dirks, ad sales manager Pam Marino, and I thought it would be fun to set up a mobile studio next to the choice booth in the exhibit hall and talk to our guests right out in the open. While I can't say we had a captive audience, it was great to be able to connect and speak with our guests face-to-face, surrounded by the buzz and activity of the show floor. And thanks to all of you who stopped by to say hello. This particular episode is brought to you by Credo, and in it I speak with Brian Gray from Case Western Reserve University and Credo GM Ian Singer, and we talk about Case Western's innovative approaches to first-year experience programming. So, here's me welcoming our guests from the great city of Cleveland during the 2019 ACRL conference. All right, hi everybody, I'm Bill Mickey, the host of The Authority File and the editorial director here at Choice. This episode is being recorded live on the show floor of the ACRL 2019 conference. Joining me here at the Choice booth are Ian Singer, the general manager at Credo. Hi, Ian.
Hello.
And Brian Gray, special projects officer from the Kelvin Smith Library at Case Western Reserve University. Hello, Brian.
Good morning, Bill. Welcome to Cleveland.
Well, thank you very much. We're very excited to be here. So we are all here to discuss some of the many innovations going on in the first-year experience space. We'll use Case Western Reserve University as sort of a case study for addressing problems inherent in familiarizing first-year students with the library and how some features unique to Case exacerbated or made the problems more acute. So, without further ado, we'll get started. So, Brian, I imagine some of our listeners know a little bit about Case Western Reserve, that it's an engineering-heavy school. It's located here in Cleveland. But could you tell us a little bit more about the student profile on campus, especially the first-year students?
Yes, thank you. Well, additional to engineering, we're known heavily for our medicine and business.
Okay.
But we have really strong arts, humanities, social science, and law programs, a very inclusive curriculum. We have about 11,000 students. But what makes us unique is about 55% are grad students, so
Okay.
A lot of attention goes to the graduate student body.
Yeah.
But then when we look specifically at the undergrads, a quarter of the undergrads are engineering students.
Okay.
And they have their whole career planned out already. 14% of our undergrads are also international students, so that brings unique challenges.
Right.
Only a quarter of our students from Ohio. So we're seeing a lot of these students for the first time, having to focus on Cleveland and living in Ohio, things like that. But when we look specifically at our first-year students, this past year we had 1,400 students, and that was out of 26,000 applicants, so very selective. These are top-notch students that maybe never had to ask questions about research or using a library or even had any challenges in their high school experience. On top of it, 20% of our first-year students are citizens of other countries. And 10%, and this number actually surprised me, I had to look this up, are actually first-time attendees from their family. So they have nothing to fall back on, yet they've been a really good student through high school and not had to ask questions and experienced any challenges till now.
Right. Now, do you tend to look at those stats as a matter of course, as you're sort of developing your first-year programming?
We do, really.
Yeah.
The Council of Library, we sort of feel like every year is a new group of students, so we try not to just, hey, we're just going to do the same thing every year. We try to adapt every year, adjust, make adjustments, so we have those conversations through the summer of how's it looking, is there something we should drop, something we should add, things like that.
Okay. Talk about the evolution of Case's first-year experience programming. I mean, I take it the first iteration of this was basically info-lit programming and outreach to attract people into the library?
Yeah, so it was very traditional, faculty inviting us to the classrooms. Case does use a seminar approach to the general education requirements, so it's writing intensive, doing presentations, learning the research process. The challenge we have is they only go up to 17 students per session. So there's 80 to 90 sessions in the first semester, and then repeated again in the second semester.
Wow.
We have less than 10 librarians. So scalability is a real big challenge. And that was one of the main reasons we've made some of the changes we've had, is we couldn't get to 80 to 90 sessions.
Okay.
Back-to-back semesters.
Yeah, no, little much to ask there. So I imagine that description is kind of unique to Case. Would you agree with that, Ian? How does that compare to other schools you're working with at Credo?
As it relates to the first year experience and what Brian and Case is doing, it's been unique and innovative, but that trend is slowly changing because there's a recognition of a lot of the issues that the students are having when they come in around research. And also because retention is becoming a more strategic imperative for anybody in a post-secondary institution, including libraries. Making sure that these students stick is pretty critical. So I think what Brian and his team have done, from the conference development to spreading the news, so to speak, to the industry, and with the programs that Brian was just talking about, Case has been an innovator, but that trend is changing, and the difference is really 2-year, 4-year. The innovations are a little different based on the need and the imperative of the school's mission.
Yep, exactly. Brian, among your duties at the Kelvin Smith Library, you're also one of the founders of the Personal Librarian program. Can you talk about that program and what a personal librarian is?
So we're going on it's like 6 or 7 years now, and it was founded, Gail Reese, one of our associate directors, and myself, were approached in the summer leading into a fall semester. The university was struggling with student retention, but for a different reason than a lot of universities. We might not have been the first choice for a lot of students. And they came to Case and never adapted well to the culture or the atmosphere. It's very research intensive to the point where we're constantly telling students, take a break, relax. You can get 5 minutes. Walk down the street to the museum, go out to a restaurant. And so we designed this program to be, instead of teaching about the library and marketing the library, to really focus on, let's have a relationship with somebody in the library. Let's introduce the people of the library, and when you need us, you'll come back later, the sophomore year, this junior year. And so what we did is we partnered with our residence halls, and we assigned students, personal librarians by floor in residence halls. And right now we have 2 librarians assigned to each of the residence halls. So one of us is always available. If the one's out of town, the other one's available. And the students can go to the person they're most comfortable working with. And if we're not the subject librarian that needs to help them fulfill that specific need, we know who the person is. And we will hand walk them to an office or a desk or set up a separate meeting and say, hey, here's the expert. It's going to get you going. You have everything you need.
Good. You mentioned an issue with scale earlier. Has that kind of factored into this at all, or are you managing that I guess the need?
So the scale, once we switch this, has been a little easier because it's participating in social activities or going to events residence halls already doing. So we're not prepping events, we're just attending and maybe helping with the event. And because there's 2 librarians sharing 100 to 200 students, as long as one librarian got to the event, you get the interaction with the students. And
so maybe it's a little bit of a lighter touch.
And most of the interactions after the events tend to be email. So low labor. You might have, like in a semester, you might meet with 5 to 6 students one-on-one, maybe offer to buy a coffee, because a lot of the conversations aren't about academics. It's, well, I'm too afraid to talk to my parents or my teachers about this, but maybe I'm not an engineer. Like my father or my mother was an engineer, but I am not. Like, and my personal background is I have an undergrad in chemical engineering. I switched to library science almost immediately after graduation. I've had so many conversations with students about how did you think about that and how did you have that conversation? And then whether the students stayed in engineering or switched majors, they came back their junior, senior year and said, you were wonderful. You helped me at a time of need. Now I need help with this 20-page paper.
Wow.
And you're the person I worked with previously.
That's a pretty cool role. It's almost like a backup advisor or a counselor.
And it was a hard adaptation for the librarians because you get a little bit of you got to do the sales, consulting, not the just here's the stuff. And so it was a great adaptation for us over the years to build a team that could handle that capability. And
did that sort of evolve naturally, or did you sort of have conversations about sort of have conversations about the conversations you were having with the kids as you went along?
A little both.
So
it did evolve naturally. All the personal librarians for the first several years, we'd meet monthly and share what worked, what didn't work, what experiences did each person have. We also brought in some external people. We brought in people from our business school to talk with us. We brought in people from the office on campus that supports faculty instruction. We brought in international support services.
So a lot of partnerships.
Tutoring. And we want to hear each of their perspectives of how we best could work with the students.
Okay, awesome. So Ian, Credo has developed a bunch of resources around the first year experience. Can you talk about why you've settled on FYE and what the opportunity there is for you?
Yeah, sure. It's not that we have created products around FYE per se. What has changed really is our positioning and our thought leadership in that area. A few years back, when I joined Credo 3 years ago, I commissioned a study with Library Journal to understand the perceptions of the faculty and students in the first year around what the library offered, what value they see. And from that survey, it became very clear that Credo could position our product to support all the issues that Brian was talking about in terms of research instruction training for the first year in particular. Our resource set after doing the competitive landscape, we can't compete with an EBSCO, we can't compete with ProQuest. The scale is not there. So we decided to be expert at one particular thing, combining our research platform, which is known as the Credo Online Reference Service. In 2 or 3 years, hopefully that will be the Credo Online Research Service, and our learning tools, which are designed to help librarians such as Brian and staff who might not have time to develop a curriculum around things information literacy, to not only provide that instruction, but also to assess it. And then finally, one of the major aha moments for me was at a Charleston conference where I had breakfast with the Dean of Libraries at Arkansas State University, and I posed a very simple question. I said to him, if you could make your library more strategic to the administration, what goals would you want to support? Recruitment, retention, remediation. And from that came this idea called Building Bridges, where with Arkansas State, who has developed, and yes, they use Credo's tools, so there's that. But they've developed deeper instruction. They offer 35 different instructional courses. But then the Building Bridges goes down to the regional high schools that feed into Arkansas State. So they've licensed the product. We've built a online learning community, best practices, and the main goal there was, okay, let's now start assessing recruitment. And so the cohort schools that participated in the Building Bridges program had more students matriculate to Arkansas State. Retention, those students in that cohort who went and got that instruction from the library have a higher retention rate than those who don't, and remediation was reduced also. So it's the trifecta with this program. And so it's all around that. I would say the first year experience extends down to the high school, K-20 concept, all the way now through into the second year transition.
Okay, excellent, good. So we've touched on this a little, but with a cohort of 1,400 freshmen coming in and 10 librarians, that's not a lot of librarians to go around. Talk a little bit more about the challenges that presented to the library.
So additional just not having enough hours and bodies to reach everyone. It's also the students have such great variety among themselves. So designing a program or an effort that works for everyone is very hard. So that our thought with this relationship-based effort is we can customize it. And we can work with one-on-one with a student, or if we can, if a student and their roommate come to the library and sit down with the librarian, or if we have one good experience with somebody on that residence hall floor, they're going to tell the other students. And that was the most important part for us, because we didn't have the connection with the first and second semester seminars because they weren't research intensive. And it's easy to teach around research. But if they're only doing opinion pieces and, hey, I need 5 sources, I'm going to wing that, we needed to find another touch point. And it was their general comfort with campus, their experience, the connection to campus. We thought that was the touch point in that first and second semester.
Okay, and that worked out for you?
Yes, very well.
Good.
Well, an important point to touching, what Brian's articulating here is massively important, because one of the key findings from that survey was that those students who received library instruction in the first year tended to rely on the library all 4 years, and they outperform their cohorts. And if you don't get, which is why Credo is now focusing on the second year transition, if you don't get that student in the first year and a half to really understand and leverage the library's assets and the staff, you don't get them ever. Ever. And those students who have library instruction outperform those who don't. It's a fact.
Yep. The numbers are there.
The numbers are there.
Yeah. Were those basically the things that brought to your attention the need to change up how FOE was handled at Case?
Yeah, definitely the idea of student retention, but also the recruitment. It was an area we thought the library could do more. So we promote the personal librarian experience to the families while they're looking at the university.
Oh, okay.
We hear the student guides that take the families around campus, bring them into the library, and they start saying, hey, I had this wonderful experience with my personal librarian. Here's how they helped me. And it just started naturally growing. It wasn't the library throwing up a poster or putting out a flyer. It just the students started speaking to it, and that was the best thing we could get out of the whole concept.
That's cool. So talk about how that's evolved into what you're doing now. I mean, how is the library handling FOE instruction now, and how are you reaching all of those students?
So I think the biggest challenge is, like I said, the student body changes every year. So we had to keep revisiting how we're doing it. We've used different librarians and staff. So the first year we went big. We pulled it together in a few weeks. So we have about 55 librarians and staff in the building. And that first year, 30 of them were personal librarians. If you were full-time salary, you could adjust your schedule to work with a student. So we said, you're a personal librarian. So we had librarians, we had IT folks, we had administrators, we had catalogers that had never worked with a student that all of a sudden had to become personal librarians. So the biggest change we made is we moved to the research service. The reference librarians are now the personal librarians because they had to do less handoff, lead somebody to another office. And the students were getting more out of it quicker than that handoff that was happening when you had 30 people.
Less friction in the process.
The first year it felt like you were a concierge. And then we got to more of this, the expertise was already in the conversation.
Good.
So that was our biggest change over the years.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about sort of the results of all of your efforts. I mean, are these measurable from the library's perspective? Can you measure the results from these?
It's challenging. We've seen a lot of numbers that suggest it's measurable. We've seen increased gate counts. We see increased usage of the materials. We see much more reference questions, research questions. Some interesting things, we see more reference questions from faculty because what we got after the first year was, who's my personal librarian? And they've always had a librarian assigned to them. And because we rebranded as personal librarians, all of a sudden they started coming to us.
Oh, wow.
So we see results. It's hard to tap it down to one metric, though, that we could say successful. What we hear is students coming back to us their junior, senior year and saying, hey, you were my personal librarian. We said hi 2 minutes over a coffee or an ice cream cone my freshman year. Now I need help. I don't know who to go to.
Okay. So they're finally coming back around. I mean, but that's good. I mean, have you discovered that or learned that there's sort of emerging metrics or new things that you can kind of pinpoint as something that might be an engagement point or something that is measurable that you may not have thought of before you started doing all of this?
So we're starting to look at one where we were a beta partner with SpringShare for their new libCRM product. They actually built that product based on a white paper we prepared because we were going to go out and buy a CRM that was used for sales and customize it for libraries. So what we're going to start looking at is repeat returns and see that students are returning and who are they working with in the library and what are they doing. And we'll do the same thing with faculty and start to see what's effective to getting people coming back versus they're just coming back and what's actually leading to those conversations. So that's one area we plan to look. We're also looking to see if we could tie any of our interactions maybe with grades. So is there a certain course we can look at the grades and versus they came to the library, they didn't come to the library. They used library resources, they didn't use library resources. And see if there's some trends, mostly so we can educate faculty on the benefits of this.
That's it. I mean, if I could just jump in there, I think where we see the market going, the librarians going, are to align with the administration goals, right? Learning outcomes.
Right.
And the more that the librarians start actually assessing how students are doing based on the instruction that they're providing, and then aligning that ultimately to other performance within other subject disciplines, that is where then the library can really justify its ROI.
Right.
Because it's all there from a learning outcome measurement perspective.
Exactly, yeah. And I was going to ask you, like, who you're reporting these numbers up to in terms of once you get those metrics, where do they go? Where do you go from there?
So I think we're also unique in that we have an assessment officer in the library that can crunch the data, and she's got no specific tie to any role in the library, so she's a sort of a neutral party. So we do provide data to the provost, the deans, even the individual faculty. So we visit a classroom and do some of these things. We share those results with the faculty because we want them to see that we're adapting as well as they're adapting the curriculum. We're adjusting just as they are, and there's things we could do better together looking at some of this data.
Okay. So all of these FYE innovations didn't just show up out of nowhere, as we've seen. So they were responses to problems that the library was encountering. But at the same time, you were devising clever solutions. You were looking for new ideas and trying out new things. Those conversations ultimately wound up becoming what is now a really sophisticated conference, the Personal Librarian and First Year Experience Library Conference. Can you talk a little bit about that, how that got started, Brian?
So it was actually unique in that we had to train 30 librarians to be personal librarians. You can't send 30 people to a conference. We said, let's bring people to us. So the first year in 2014, we held this national conference. We had 150 attendees from 71 institutions in the United States and Canada that did poster presentations, breakout sessions. We had keynotes, and it was such an amazing experience in the sharing that happened. We repeated it 2 more times on the off years of ACRL, to the point that the most recent one, we had 200 attendees, and we maxed our space. And an email listserv has come out of that where people are continuing the conversations, amazing partnerships with Credo and others, all from, hey, we're trying this, but how are you doing it differently? And because every conference was focused on information literacy, but this was a little different, and there wasn't a home for it.
Right. That's fantastic. I mean, so this started as a way for you to sort of educate and inform your librarians, but really it became more of a collaborative
Absolutely,
effort.
Very collaborative. Start off as a training.
What librarians do.
So we are looking for a new home for the conference. Our needs have changed, and so we're reaching out to people to see who may be a host going forward. So if people are interested, I'd love to have contacts.
Get in touch. All right, we'll put that out there. So you did mention that the conference has helped you go beyond library instruction topics and have conversations about topics that are broader in scope, such as building relationship, marketing and outreach, assessment, and so on. Things that might be considered, quote, softer skills, but no less important when it comes down to securing more engagement from your community. Can you talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah, so I think some of the topics that really seem to resonate with the 3 conferences is, creating an environment for repeat interactions with students. So it's not just that one, I'm in the class, they did that assignment, it's done.
Right.
A lot of things around establishing relationships, leveraging outreach that public libraries have been doing an amazing job, and starting to take some of those examples and apply them in an academic setting. Because I think at times universities, we get a little stale, or we think, oh, we have our audience. We don't have to market to them outreach. They're here. They're captive. And then now we have to do something differently. So a lot of the sessions were things that people said, hey, I saw that my local public library did this. Now I'm going to tweak it, and here's how I did it in the university environment, which opened a lot of eyes. And another panel, the hottest panel, was a student panel where the students said their senior year they were still afraid to ask questions in the library, including a panelist whose mom was a librarian, and he was still afraid to come to the library and ask questions.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And how they felt these relationships overcame that hurdle.
Yeah.
Maybe he was just afraid of his mother.
Could be. You never know. Ian, so what makes CASE such a good partner for Credo? Why did Credo as an organization choose to work with Brian and the folks there?
Well, so everything that you just heard from Brian about the conference aligns with the positioning that we're trying to, as an organization, be known for in the industry. Thought leadership, giving back in that particular space to sponsor librarians to connect, get together, talk about this stuff. And if through that we can provide a valuable service, then that's what matters the most. the ideation that comes from that conference, and we'll speak about it, I'm assuming in a few minutes, the award.
Yep.
These are things that you can't promote them enough. Even though what we're talking about, what Brian's doing and Case is doing is second nature to them now and they're leaders in this, it's not across the board.
Right.
It's continuing to evolve, so it's important that we get behind that and support it. And I think, Brian and his team, very inclusive. The panels and the content objects within the tracks were just spot on.
Yeah.
I bounced around to a number of them, and they range from high school engagement, right, to make that connection for college readiness all the way through to the second year.
Yeah.
And this is the stuff that is really front and center for what Credo is all about. And then we take that information and we help amplify it in terms of content marketing throughout the year. So you'll not really see Credo promoting our products. You go to our booth later, or even in the future, come to our websites. We offer a ton of free information, such as our first year experience guide. It's a guidebook downloaded by almost 1,000 librarians. It's all free, and it comes from the partnership that has evolved with Brian and Case.
Okay, excellent. So I think part of that evolution that you're talking about, and I think Brian, you mentioned this earlier, is that every school is unique. It's got its own characteristics that sort of have an influence on how they handle their own FYE programming and services. But I'm wondering if since you've been kind of one of the organizers of this conference, if you could kind of talk more about some of the broader trends that you're seeing coming out of FYE and what people are bringing in terms of their experiences.
Yep, and you're absolutely right. The first year experience isn't cookie cutter at all.
Yeah.
So one thing that came out of this is I actually have a book coming out in May with 3 other authors, Gail Reese from Case as well, and Heather Bukansky from Toronto, and Lynn Bisco from Elon. And what we focused was on how personal librarian programs were different for these 3 institutions.
Yeah.
And very different size and scale, approach. But we also went out and looked at what other people were doing and pulled in a lot of examples. But it focused on the relationships and the concept rather than do this, do this, do this. It wasn't a menu.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we saw in there was there's even high schools now leveraging these skills. So we, for this book, we actually interviewed 3 high schools that were starting to use these programs because they felt like the students need that experience before they got to college. And then hopefully they got into a college that also was using these skills, and it just was a natural progression. But I think the biggest trends we saw was the partnerships around campus, whether it be with the residence halls or the cafeterias or tutoring. Even we saw examples where people were partnering with the campus police department to interact with students. So anywhere there was a chance for an interaction to focus on being a person rather than a librarian or a resource book, just to get the conversation started is the general trend we see across all 3 of the conferences.
And do you feel like, does the size of the school tend to matter, or can a small institution, small private institution or whatever, basically do some of the things that a larger public university might be able to do, or is it?
It's very scalable. So a lot of the institutions that come to the conference, they are the librarian for the personal librarians or the first year experience, and they do everything.
Right.
They might have to do it differently. They might have to rely on email or other blogs, Facebook in different ways. They might be more virtual, or it might be that there's a delay that the student needs to set up an appointment because there's only one person. But then like University of Toronto has huge student body. They do a couple in-person events, but it's mostly virtual, but it's still accomplishing what that student body would be used to and what the library can accommodate. So I think it's very scalable and customizable. And I'd actually recommend that institutions, I think what worked for us is we experimented for a year or 2, and every year we changed until we found a model that worked for Case Western.
Right.
This, just to add, again, it depends on the library segment, 2-year, 4-year public, private, but really it takes leadership at the library level to align the library's efforts in this area to administrative and strategic goals. Because if, you've even heard Brian say this, if that senior who never went to the library, you're not going to ever get that person back, right? So if there's a strong and intentional first year experience program, it's something that can really impact not just the numbers that we're talking about, the outcomes, but if done really well, depending on 2-year, 4-year public-private, it's a hook for students right, this school has this wonderful type of program where I am going to be welcomed and brought in, and it's going to make the orientation easier. And we're going to talk about that in a bit, about the Innovators Award winners, right? They do some of this stuff very well. And so it really changes the nature of the library. And let's be very clear on this. With budget issues being what they are, right, the libraries that are forward-thinking, like Case and others, are putting themselves in a better strategic position to continue to get broader administration support.
Excellent. Well said. Yeah, absolutely true. And in fact, I do want to get right into that that awards program now. So, so it's the Credo FYE Awards program. So how does that work? Who nominates the individuals or libraries for the awards? And what are some of the categories that you're looking at?
So first, before I forget, I would encourage all your listeners to really look at and consider applying. I mean, it's not a very onerous submission process by design.
Good.
But the rewards are nice, and we've gotten, over the past couple of years, a good influx of award nominees. So before I forget, there's that. So the idea came about,
I'll just interrupt real quick. So do they go? Where do they go to?
There's a site for that.
Okay.
The URL I can't remember offhand.
Is it a conference site or?
It's Credo hosts the site.
Okay.
Yeah, it's basic submission. Site, We can get that to your listeners subsequently.
Okay.
Again, on our corporate website, there's all this information about first year stuff, all free, tons of it, very directed. And so the idea really was to focus not just on a library and recognizing a team approach, but also a librarian. What Brian said, and the scalability, it only takes one person, right? And that's how it all starts. And so it was just a really nice addition from a content perspective to the conference, right? We're not shilling Credo. We're going to recognize award recipients who are doing outstanding and innovative things, and it ties very nicely to the conference. So we had them there, we hosted them there, presented the award, why they won it at the conference, and then because it's off year, this year we're going to be doing the same in a little bit at the Credo's booth, awarding Xavier and Bryant Moore from Texas A&M.
Excellent. And then who does the judging? Is it a combination of Credo?
Well, I'm the sole representative from Credo.
Okay.
And then we have a group of distinguished first-year experienced librarians led by Brian.
Yep.
And then the award winner
comes back
and
as
does.
a judge? Yeah. Nice. Okay. All right. So, Ian, how do you see FOE transforming over the medium term, say over the next 3 to 5 years?
I hope it stays more sticky, and these, more folks are really gravitating. I know they are gravitating towards that need because we're having good success with our offerings, and they're aligned to that. But beyond that, I think, and we've talked about it, we're seeing more intentional partnerships between the post-secondary schools and the high schools, right? Getting them college ready. From the 2-year up to the 4-year publics. The private's a little different, right? Different relationships between community colleges and their 4-year partner schools.
Right.
And really, we're now also talking more about that second-year transition. We have Beth Black from Ohio State doing a lot of writing around that. We met her at the first-year experience conference, and what she was talking about was right on. So to answer your question, it's the secondary school to that 1.5, 2-year period, where the first-year experience really touches on that. And so when I think of first-year experience, I think about high school through the second-year undergraduate. And that's how powerful the first-year experience programming needs to be.
Okay, excellent. All right, well, that's all we have time for. Ian, Brian, thank you very much for joining us on the Authority File.
Thank you.
All right.
My pleasure.
All right. You just heard from Brian Gray from Case Western Reserve University and Credo General Manager Ian Singer. This concludes the first of our series of episodes recorded live from the exhibit hall floor at the 2019 ACRL conference held in Cleveland, Ohio. You can find all of the episodes of the Authority File on your favorite podcast app or on our website, choice360.org. Just click on the librarianship drop-down. On choice360.org, you'll also find information on Choice's entire product platform, including Choice Reviews, CC Advisor, Choice Webinars, resources for college libraries, our white papers, and a whole lot more. A great way to keep up with the Authority File is to join the Choice Authority File Facebook group, which you can access via the Choice Reviews Facebook page. As a member of the group, you can give us feedback, suggest podcast participants, chat with other listeners, and submit new topic ideas. Sponsorship and advertising for the Authority File podcast are handled by Choice's advertising manager, Pam Marino, and the production and editing are all done by Choice's digital media specialist, Mark Dirks. That's all for this week. Thanks for joining us.